When it comes to the money you spend every day, we have you covered every morning. Making money makes sense. Weekdays on CBS Mornings.
It's a history-making meeting. 4 extraordinary women who are all 4-star generals and admirals.
How did you deal with being discriminated against?
I just worked harder.
The future of an ever-evolving U.S. military when we go person to person.
A school shooting claims the lives of 3 children and 3 staff members.
We feel it was targeted and planned.
Well, I can't do anything except plead with the Congress to act reasonably.
It is time for us to move beyond thoughts and prayers.
Trump could soon face possible indictments in several states.
I mean, the people know me. I think that's why I'm going up during this hoax that's taking place in New York.
Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Thank you for joining us. Sources tell CBS News a judge ruled that former Vice President Mike Pence must testify before a federal grand jury investigating January 6th. We'll have more on that later this half hour. Meanwhile, multiple lawmakers on Capitol Hill are calling for action after that school shooting in Nashville. But top Democrats are acknowledging that new gun safety legislation is unlikely to pass anytime soon. During a speech in North Carolina today, President Biden again called on Congress to pass an assault weapons ban in response to the shooting.
Pass it. This should not be a partisan issue. It's a common sense issue. We have to act now. And people say, why do I keep saying this if it's not happening? Because I want you to know who isn't doing it, who isn't helping, to put pressure on them.
So for more on this, we have both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue covered. Nicole Killian and Weijia Jiang join us now. Nicole is CBS News congressional correspondent, and Weijia is CBS News senior White House correspondent. Great to see you both. Thanks so much for your time. Weijia, I want to start with you because we just played that sound from the president. This seems like kind of a playbook of sorts that the White House administers, where unfortunately you have a school shooting, you have a Congress really unwilling or unable to act, and then you have the president calling for action. Kind of walk us through what the White House is trying to do here, given that we know what, that these sides on Capitol Hill are pretty immovable.
Yeah, Caitlin, you're absolutely right. That clip could have been after numerous school shootings, mass shootings that have happened since the president took office, because frankly, there's only so much he can say and do. And he really laid that out at every chance he got today, calling on lawmakers to act, to do more, because as he said today, his executive authority has run out, and it was very limited to begin with, because he can't change the law. He can't ban assault rifles. He can't implement so-called red flag laws that allow courts to temporarily seize firearms from anyone who is deemed a threat and dangerous to themselves or others. And that's precisely why, Caitlin, he continues to say, look, this lies on lawmakers. The problem is that so far they have not reached any sort of compromise when it comes to a complete ban of weapons. But we should take this moment, though, to remind people that under President Biden, as you mentioned during our earlier conversation, Caitlin, today, that, he was able to sign a gun bill into law that was the most significant piece of reform in nearly 30 years, since 1994, when there was an assault weapons ban implemented, but expired after a decade. And so even though there has not been a complete ban, there have been millions and millions of dollars allocated to allow states to implement those so-called red flag laws, and the effort is ongoing. So I think the White House and the president is aware that he can't not say anything, but he is very limited in what he can say. And so now what we are hearing is that he's turning up the pressure. He wants the American public to know its lawmakers, and wants them to know which lawmakers particularly are against the ban of assault rifles.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, kind of this message geared towards the public more so than Congress kind of knowing what he's up against with a divided Congress. You mentioned the bill that was signed into law last year, Nicole. That was obviously passed after Uvalde and was kind of an acknowledgement that that's as far as Congress could go. Let's take a little bit of a listen to the reaction that we heard from lawmakers, and then I'll get your thoughts on the other side.
I'm certain that politics will wave into everything, but right now I'm not focused on the politics of the situation. I'm focused on the families and the victims.
The American people deserve a fight, and we need that fight to be about common sense measures like safe storage and better background checks, but also an assault weapons ban.
I'm not very hopeful, yet we have to try. And it comes down to a basic question for the voters of America. If you're sick and tired of worrying whether your kids or grandkids are going to come home safely from school each day, or from the movie, or out in the grocery store, will you do something about it? Will you ask candidates for Congress where they stand on banning assault weapons, military assault weapons?
So, Nicole, Ouija had mentioned that sound we heard from Biden could have been something that he said after any other shooting. I mean, I think you could say the same for what we're hearing on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, well, keep in mind, too, I mean, these are societal problems that are multifaceted. So, it requires a holistic and comprehensive approach. And certainly legislation is one way to address that. But as those lawmakers noted, right now, there does not appear to be a consensus about a path forward legislatively because of some of the political dynamics here on Capitol Hill in terms of having a Republican House majority and a Democratic Senate. In terms of the response that we've heard from lawmakers, you heard from Tennessee Senator Haggerty there. I mean, this is his home state, saying, I'm not even going to touch the politics right now. And that's kind of what we have heard from a number of congressional Republicans today. Senate Republican Whip John Thune, who, delivered a press conference earlier today in Senate Minority Leader McConnell's absence, said, he thinks that it's premature right now to even discuss legislation at this point because we don't know all the facts that have happened with this situation in Nashville. Democrats, on the other hand, many of them have been calling for action, and some of them do support the idea of an assault weapons ban. Leader Schumer said that, it's still a matter of trying to find the votes. Keep in mind, the House passed an assault weapons ban in the last Congress. It wasn't taken up in the Senate. Unclear if the majority leader regrets not bringing that up or if he will move forward with that in this Congress, given that some of his members do support, and we are hearing calls for that in the House as well, because they have already passed legislation in past Congresses, and those who supported that legislation just sent a letter late today demanding that House Republicans take up an assault weapons ban or at least hold a vote. And now, in terms of Speaker McCarthy, trying to get reaction from him, reporters have asked him multiple times since this shooting happened yesterday, and he still has yet to respond in any capacity about this shooting.
Oh, interesting point. Yeah, we'll keep an eye out for whether he responds. Ouija, the president made these remarks today as he was on the road, which also kind of shows that time and time again we see, starting out trying to focus on one thing and yet another mass shooting that the president has to respond to. But tell us a little bit more about what he was doing today on the road. He was in North Carolina.
That's right. He is on a big infrastructure tour to remind people of the bill that he signed into law that provides billions of dollars for new infrastructure, new jobs. And this is really a concerted effort by the White House to remind the public about some of his accomplishments. It is very well known that this president believes that one of the faults when he served as vice president under the Obama administration was that there weren't enough victory laps for successes. And it's no surprise that as we are anticipating a formal announcement for a re-election for the president, that he is now going to be fanning out along with other administration officials to different parts of the country to tout these accomplishments, to, cut ribbons, to get shovels in the ground, to remind people that those dollars that he helped broker in Congress are going to use as he looks at the entire economic picture, which, of course, will be a key part of any re-election campaign.
Yeah, it will be really interesting to see which lawmakers join him on those trips as well, as they are all running for re-election too. Nicole, back over to Congress. Last week we were talking about the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and what Congress would do in reaction to that. They are now having hearings. I know you've been talking to lawmakers about what the congressional response should be. What are you hearing? What are the next steps here?
Well, the next steps are in terms of this hearing that happened with the Senate Banking Committee. Of course, there is the hope that maybe these regulators can come back. They're currently working on conducting a review, and also that some of the executives from these failed banks, Silicon Valley Bank as well as Signature Bank, could come back and testify. You know, I did have a chance to speak to the chair of the committee, Sherrod Brown, as well as Elizabeth Warren, who has been a vocal, supporter of bank regulation and reform. So take a listen to what both of them told me about who's to blame for what happened.
There are guilty parties all over in Congress and among the regulators, from the Trump administration weakening the rules further, but especially the bank executives.
Do you still think there need to be changes at the top?
I absolutely think there need to be changes at the top. You know, the vice chair is now conducting a study of what went wrong, and I appreciate that he does that. But Jerome Powell needs to recuse himself. After all, he's the one in charge of the Fed that failed so massively as the principal regulator for SVB.
So as you heard, Senator Warren there calling for action at the Fed. And, broadly speaking, in terms of lawmakers, a lot of the questioning in today's hearing was about what these regulators knew and when they knew it, because clearly they were aware that there were some issues with this bank as early as 2021. And, they really tried to wave away responsibility in terms of saying, hey, we let these banks know, and ultimately it was them to make reforms. So lawmakers still left this hearing with a lot more questions than answers, so I would expect more scrutiny of these banks to come, in addition to a potential legislative action.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that for sure. Well, Nicole Killian and Weijia Jiang, you covered a lot for us today. We really appreciate your time and reporting. And one Tennessee congressman said today that Washington won't fix the problem of school shootings. We'll talk to him next. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today. I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
I always tell people that Twitter would not be Twitter without Black Twitter. It's just us being in fellowship with each other.
And it becomes a conversation you don't want to be left out of.
People really started to recognize the power of activism on Twitter.
Based on that one tweet, the hashtag #OscarsSoWhite was trending around the world.
If anything has really powered Black Twitter, it's been humor.
If your food ain't right, we're going to tell you about that too.
We tend to create change, create culture and cool.
That's how movements happen on Black Twitter and go beyond more than that.
Black Twitter, the Twitterverse that changed a generation. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
The news doesn't have to always be depressing.
What do you love about running?
It can be uplifting. That human connection that we create on the broadcast every night is incredibly important.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. As we just discussed, both sides of Pennsylvania Avenue are grappling with what, if anything, Washington can do to stop mass shootings like the one we saw yesterday in Nashville. One such member, Tennessee Republican Congressman Tim Burchett, joins us now from Capitol Hill. Congressman, good to see you. Our hearts, of course, are with those families in Tennessee. I know that you represent the Knoxville area, but still in your state. Earlier today, you said that Congress is not going to fix this. Why do you think that is?
Ma'am, we can pass all the laws we want. It was already in a gun-free zone. We do that all the time up here. We pass laws and then they really have no effect. You got to deal with what's at the heart of this. It's evil. Some people would say demon possession even, but go further. We've got a mental health crisis in this country. 1 in 5 Americans are affected by it. We can't seem to come to grips with funding school security. I co-sponsored a bill last year which went down partisan lines and died, of course.
But, I mean, in this instance, the shooter was able to just shoot through the door and go right in. I mean, what kind of security measures would have prevented that?
If you had security guards in the school, obviously. It was a private school, so you're under different rules and regulations there, of course. But, again, you're not going to stop evil. If somebody is wanting to do it, I mean, look at Timothy McVeigh. He basically bought agriculture fertilizer, ammonium nitrate, and diesel fuel, and blew up the Murray building in Oklahoma. And so it killed over 100 people. We lose somebody every 45 minutes to a drunk driver in this country. We lose over 100 people a day to automobile accidents. But this is horrific, and it's horrific. And I do not know. If I could pass a law and stop it tomorrow, I would, but I don't know what law we could pass. It's already illegal what went on.
But shouldn't that include preventing someone with a mental illness from obtaining a firearm?
It already is illegal. You've just stated what I've been trying to say, ma'am. It is already illegal for someone with a mental illness in the state of Tennessee to own a firearm or obtain a firearm. Obviously, something was done illegal. If somebody wants to break a law and somebody wants to commit a horrific crime, which is what this is, it's a horrible situation. But you can pass all the laws you want up here and we can run home and say, look at these great laws we passed. But the reality is you're not going to accomplish anything. Evil people are going to do evil things.
So is that the solution then, is just we don't have the capacity to deal with this, so we're just going to move on?
No, ma'am. As a matter of fact, it's just the exact opposite. We've got to address mental illness is what it is.
We have seen this time and time again, though, and we ask the same questions because there doesn't appear to be a willingness to address this on Capitol Hill. I mean, what kind of legislation could actually work here?
Well, tell me, what would you like to see? Again, if you ban weapons, it's already illegal to have firearms on a school ground. These are crime-free zones. The criminals just laugh at that, as you saw. She ran right through a school. You're not supposed to have firearms on the campus. She obviously has a mental illness. She was able to obtain a gun illegally. There are already laws on the books. And so I don't know that we're going to be able to do a whole lot with a community that is willing to commit a crime and continue to do so. And that's the way it's just going to be.
Are schools just going to be unsafe then?
No, ma'am. I believe if you would, if they had proper security guards there, that would go a long ways in doing it. It was stated that she was looking at another location, but chose not to go there because they had security there. She went to where the least path of resistance, and it was an ugly, horrible result.
I mean, she did identify other plans, and again, we still don't know the contents of that manifesto, but I do want to ask a little bit more about this idea around an assault weapons ban. Obviously, you don't support it. There's little chance of anything passing on Capitol Hill, but I want you to help me kind of understand this this kind of weapon. You know, trauma surgeons have described it as these bullets pulverizing the bone. Help explain why someone should have access to that kind of firearm.
Well, they're out in the public, ma'am, and to say that I need to defend my wife and child at my home with something, a muzzle loader or a .22 pistol, is just not the reality anymore of what we're seeing. You have guns brought in illegally over the border. You have armories broken into where automatic weapons are stolen. And the bad people have superior firepower right now. You see that all the time. And to deny me that right as a law-abiding citizen, I have a real problem with that.
What about background checks? I mean, this is something that we see time and time again. Public polling, vast majority support some kind of universal background check. You voted against this 2 years ago. Would you change your mind on that?
No, ma'am. The bill actually did more than that. It actually was a gun seizure bill and had other things in it that were unconstitutional. See, that's the problem with Washington. You all just read the surface of the bill when it was a multi-page bill that dealt with many other things dealing with the constitutionality of firearms, to which I don't support removing any constitutional provisions.
What about a separate, standalone piece of legislation that authorizes expanded background checks?
We already have background checks, ma'am. Again, you have a criminal who's going to go up. Well, you have criminals that are going to go around this, and that's what they do every time.
All right, Congressman Tim Burchett from Tennessee, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Donald Trump returned to Fox News Monday night and had a lot to say about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. A preview of what could be a long primary fight ahead. Coming up, you're streaming Red and Blue.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She dazzled on the court and off the court as a businesswoman.
Thank you for joining us on Person to Person. Tennis superstar and entrepreneur Serena Williams.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I asked my students, what are we going to do about racism in the United States?
The backlash over teaching about racism in American schools.
I don't think it has any place in the classroom.
We can either pretend and say, no, we're not racist and we're all great people, or we can actually start to do the really, really hard work of addressing it.
How did you lose your job? I made the statement that white privilege is a fact.
Is it helping diversity and inclusion?
When you bring in different people's stories and experience, it enriches education.
If you don't talk about something, it doesn't go away.
Or driving us further apart?
What schools are doing to our children in the name of anti-racism is in fact teaching them racism.
The intention is to put us in this war against each other.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A federal judge has decided former Vice President Mike Pence must appear before a grand jury investigating former President Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The decision sweeping aside separate legal efforts by both Pence and Trump. Pence has argued the vice president's role as president of the Senate, follow me here, grants him constitutional protections. CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa and CBS News political director Finn Gomez join us now to break all of the politics down on this. Bob, I want to start with you because you have been following all of this so closely. Pence had said that he was going to fight this subpoena to appear. It appears that he is not going to win that battle. Tell us a little bit more about what the vice president has to do here.
Caitlin, it's good to be with you. As you reported in your own interview with former Vice President Mike Pence, he has been making an argument that it would be unconstitutional for him to participate as a witness in this grand jury proceeding due to his role as not only the former vice president, but the former president of the U.S. Senate. He has always had, just as every vice president has had, a constitutional role in the legislative branch. His lawyers have said this speech and debate clause as part of the Constitution should prevent him from testifying. But a federal judge has said, no, sir, you must testify in this investigation and provide testimony about your private exchanges with former President Trump. That all being said, the former vice president could still try to appeal this decision, perhaps all the way up to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, as he has said that he would do. Bob, you're coming to us from Lower Manhattan, and we should explain why, because you're also covering this grand jury investigation into former President Trump and alleged hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. I know you have some new reporting about kind of the status of this grand jury and whether there is, in fact, an indictment looming this week. Tell us a little bit more about that and who else we saw testify in front of the grand jury this week.
Caitlin, might I offer 3 letters, TBD, to be determined. We are at a stasis moment here in this ongoing grand jury investigation in Manhattan. The district attorney, Alvin Bragg, is taking his time to look over the documents he's accumulated with his investigation, to think through whether he wants to pursue additional witnesses. While the grand jury heard from David Pecker on Monday, the former publisher of the National Enquirer, it's unclear if the district attorney wants to bring further witnesses before this grand jury, before the district attorney ultimately decides whether or not he will seek an indictment of former President Donald Trump.
So TBD on that, but the presidential primary in which Trump is running is full steam ahead, Finn, and we're seeing these gloves come off between Trump and DeSantis. Trump took to Fox News last night, where he hasn't appeared in a while. I want to play a little clip, and then we'll talk about it.
Ron came to see me, tears in his eyes. He said, I need you to do me a big favor. First he asked for the meeting, then he asked me for the favor. I said, what's the favor? Would you endorse me? I got him the nomination. By the way, couldn't have never gotten the nomination. He would be working in either a pizza parlor place or a law office right now, okay? And he wouldn't be very happy.
All right, so Finn, it's obvious that former President Trump is thinking a lot about the Florida governor. Tell us a little bit about what you think of that exchange.
Well, it's not a new one. He keeps repeating it. He said it, essentially, he started that a couple weeks ago when we traveled with him to Davenport, Iowa. And we just saw this sort of this change, this pivot to where he just fully started attacking Ron DeSantis, who, as we know, has not entered the race yet. He's expected to after his legislative session in Tallahassee. But clearly, it seems that he believes that DeSantis and his likely entry into the race will be his biggest competition. We spoke to a source close to DeSantis and actually close to Trump too, who said that to him it was clear that to attack someone who's not even in the race yet shows that he thinks he can be beaten by him.
Interesting. And just quickly, too, I know you have some new reporting on some former Trump people moving over to a DeSantis PAC. Again, I know he hasn't announced his run yet, but what does that tell us? Tell us a little bit more about who's moving over there.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, Caitlin, because in the last few days, Aaron Navarro, our CBS News political reporter, and I have been reporting on how these former Trump officials, in part from the 2020 campaign, Aaron Perrine, Matt Wolking, sort of these heavy hitters and sort of rising stars, if you will, of these political operative world, have now jumped over to this pro-DeSantis PAC, never back down. So. And you've also seen these other sort of one person described it to me as like the Yankees of these GOP operatives. Like Jeff Rowe was formerly with Ted Cruz in 2016. He's now a senior advisor, and Phil Cox, who was his advisor during his DeSantis' reelect campaign, is now shifted over, amongst others. And you're seeing this increasing like strength, if you will, this firepower politically that's being concentrated in this PAC, which is and interestingly enough, it's not just this expectation of ads and oppo that you think that you're expecting from this PAC, but also maybe some grassroots operations, some untraditional methods that we may be seeing as DeSantis potentially readies himself for a 2024
Interesting.
entry.
So kind of laying the groundwork for whenever DeSantis gets in the race.
Right.
That's interesting because we always follow the staff movements. That tells us a lot about where the race is. Finn Gomez right here, Bob Costa in New York. Thank you both for joining us, and that does it for today for us on Red and Blue. You can stream us any day, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.
In today's Money Watch, business analyst Jill Schlesinger is here to help.
How do you even begin to make the best use of your money? If you've got a match from your employer, don't give away that money.
Dollar Jill, y'all.
CBS Mornings, starting at 7.